What's going on, everybody? It's Steiner here. Let's just get right into it. It's another episode of Secondhand Talent, and we have artist Mark Serlo with us. He's been drawing since childhood. He has always had a passion for rock and roll, and that has translated into an incredible career over the last 20 years, more, sorry, uh, for bands like the Grateful Dead, Phil Lesh and Friends, Widespread Panic, Umphreys McGee, Disco Biscuits, and more. And starting where we'll get to early in the interview with quite a number of posters for the Boulder and Fox Theater in Boulder, which I'd love to get to. Mark, thank you so much for being a part of the show.
How you doing, man? Thanks for having me.
Man, it's such a pleasure to have you on. So we're going to start this interview the same way we start every interview, which is with this question. Had you never heard the term before, what would the word secondhand talent mean to you?
I guess I would think it was something passed down or something absorbed from someone else, somewhere along those lines.
Right on. That's fantastic. So the way that I say a lot, I really need to work on that. The way
Totally.
that we described it, the way that we describe it in the show, is as talent that is at the level of the people on the stage, but it's often overlooked by the casual fan. And what this show is about raising the profile of all the different elements that go into the live music experience. And that ranges to front of house audio, the light director, the artists for the posters of the shows, the merch people, the bartenders, the bouncers, and so many more aspects of it. So, and one of the great themes of the show has been of how the more veteran people in the scene pass down their knowledge and skills to the generations that are coming up. So that's really hitting the nail on the head in the way that you described it.
Good.
Um, so, like I said in the intro, you've been drawing all your life and painting
That's
all your
correct.
life.
That's correct.
So, tell us a little bit about what got you interested in creating art for the music scene specifically?
Uh, well, I'm 51, so I was blessed enough to be there when Jerry was still rocking, and I saw the original shakedowns and people bringing their own visions of things and their own art to a lot, and certainly making money from it and being able to tour with it. And so um yeah, I was fascinated by that, and I thought, wow, I can draw pretty well. I had been drawing. I had started being a comic book fan, and so when I was young, comics were my thing. So I
Same.
thought, well, I could bring some of that fun to all of this. And but then back then, I was 17 years old when I first saw the Grateful Dead, and uh and so I was doing wild stream of consciousness, fill every corner of the page, uh kind of, I don't know what to call it, vomit art, where it's just like every single inch of the page is covered in something. And then I
I
would
want to note
so
that I have two examples of that right here. We have this great painting, the not so well, I forget the
not
name exact,
right, the not so public domain.
not so public domain,
Right.
and then painting that that Mark was kind enough to do for my wife that I had for her
That one
birthday.
I forgot. I genuinely forgot all about it
The
doing it.
Yeah, this is hanging in our bedroom. We
I have
absolutely love it.
I've done so many that I can't even remember. But um that one's probably a little closer to my general style. The Mickey one isn't something that I do all the
Yeah, I
time.
noticed it's a little
Um,
mixed media. I'm used to
yeah,
seeing your paintings.
just playing with some old comic books I had laying around, and I'd seen an interview. I'd watched that Rick Rubin interview where he talks about, if you're making art for other people entirely, then you're not really making art. And as long as you make art for yourself, you're going to be happier about it. So I just thought, I got these old comic books. I've got this clear gesso laying around. let me play around, see what I can do. And it was just sort of like that for a couple of days, honestly.
So
Generally, I paint, as you know, more of an illustrative realism. Like it's still an
yes,
illustration, but
exactly.
it has
Exactly.
realistic qualities. Most of my work have light.
Yes.
There's a light source and a shadow and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, for sure.
So I mean, it's
Back then, I was
really
selling like Xeroxes for $5 to be on tour. Like I was a
yeah.
full blown teenage wook. Like, let's just be clear about that. There was nothing professional about what I was doing in those days. In fact, um, it's funny that you say about passing things down. So my hero in those days was Richard Biffle, who was actively involved in producing merchandise for the Grateful Dead
Yep.
through the mid to late '80s, early '90s, which was late '80s and early '90s was my time, and he was my hero. Then there was an entire another lifetime of mine. Okay. And I land in, well, I had moved to Vail, Colorado. You know how they say if it was the straight life I'd had, I wouldn't have known you all these years. And that's the
Yes.
feeling. I had a straight life for a while where I wore a suit, or not a suit, but a shirt and tie, and
Sure.
I sold printing. Pardon me, to corporations, to nonprofit organizations, to businesses. If you needed business cards or forms or annual reports or anything like that, I did that for a long time. And then uh, I decided I didn't want to do that any longer. And I moved to Vail. And so I lived in Vail for just right under 5 years. When I first moved, I worked for restaurant Kelly Lycan. You might have heard her name. She was a top chef star and an Iron Chef competitor. So she was on
Oh,
television. She's
I've
from the
I've
Pittsburgh area.
definitely seen her on both episodes on both shows.
I'm from the Pittsburgh area. She tended to hire people from the Pittsburgh area. So at this point, one of my childhood friends was working for her as Sue. And then there was another Pittsburgh guy working as chef de cuisine, and she needed a marketing manager. And so,
Hmm.
my history, kind of my college and all that kind of went along with that graphic design. And I was selling
Sure.
printing. And so she hired me as her marketing manager. And I moved out and worked for restaurant Kelly Lycan for about a year. At the end of that year, I broke both of my legs at the same time.
Whoa.
I skied out on a
I
hairline.
was about to say skiing. Yeah.
Yeah, skiing. Skied out on a hairline fracture and walked myself to the hospital. Um, yeah,
You
I didn't
walked
realize that it
yourself to
was
the
hairline.
hospital on two
My other
broken
leg was
legs?
sick. My other leg was more significantly broken, so the hairline didn't. It hurt, but not like the other one.
Yeah, it's like they say, you got a headache, have someone step on your toe. You won't be thinking
Right,
about your head
right.
anymore.
Anyways, I had to take a little bit of time off of Kelly Lycan, and then I ended up
Oh,
resigning from Kelly Lycan, and her sous chef and I opened our own breakfast and lunch cafe
oh
in
wow.
in Minturn, Colorado, where we had for a few years, and sadly that had to close. Then I moved to Boulder, and then that was when I started to in '09 was when I started to really get back to tackling art.
So, what was it about the Fox Theater specifically that made you want to create art for that many? Because there are a number of great venues in Boulder.
There
Um,
are, and believe me, when I was there was more.
yeah,
Um,
I believe
they've
that.
certainly closed a lot. Pearl Street isn't the same as it used to be. It's certainly
Same
not the
here in
town that it
Chicago.
was. Yeah. So Boulder 2024 versus Boulder '09 is such a giant difference. Um, but I had moved to Boulder from Vail because I had met a girl that I fancied, and she wanted me to come down to Boulder. So that's what happened.
The
Now, at
things
the
we
time,
do.
I was right. I was making pizza pies because I'd been cooking at the cafe and owned my own restaurant and all that. So I got a job at a pizza place pretty quickly. Um, where I would make many vegan pizzas with gluten-free crust. And I don't know if you know this, but often vegan substitutes for food are made with gluten.
I did not know that actually.
So it was ironic, but that aside, uh, and I was cooking pizza and I wasn't doing a whole hell of a lot of great financially. So I made a poster for the Biscuits at the Fox Theater, right? Just a basic lot poster. And I went and stood outside of that show after the Fox Theater and I sold a butt ton of them. Then this one gentleman walked up and bought one. He goes, "Hey, did you do this?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Dude, can you do this regularly?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You got to come talk to my boss across the way." And right across the street from the Fox Theater used to be the poster scene, which is now down on Pearl. But the
Okay.
poster shop used to be almost directly across from the Fox. There's the Smelly Deli, and then it was like right next door to the Smelly Deli. So I said, "All right." I went home fairly successful with that poster and had a couple left. No, it wasn't the Biscuits. Now I think about it, it was Les Claypool.
Oh wow, that's
So I
it's
took,
cooler
yeah,
in
it
my
is a
opinion. In my
little,
opinion.
but so I took the Les Claypool poster over to the poster scene, and the guy said, "Did you do this?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "How long did it take you?" I told him. He said, "Could you do it regularly?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Would you be interested in doing the promo posters for both Fox and the Boulder Theater?" Or he asked me to do one maybe first. And I did it. And then he was like, "Okay, can you do this one, this one, this one?" I was like, "Yep, yep, 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 yep." And so I did. Then that was just it. And I started doing almost them, not all of them, but vast majority of them for everything. I mean, I did it for Ice Cube at the Boulder. I did it for,
That's super cool.
that one was cool.
That's super cool. I'm not gonna lie. That's I
Ice Cube was
yeah.
a cool one. Trying to think of, I mean, I did it for OK Go. I did it for I did it for John McLaughlin. I
That's
got to
great.
do it for, um, gosh, man, I don't know. I'd
Yeah,
have
I mean, I'm well
And I was
aware.
also doing it at the time for the same guy that was involved with all that. Had friends at, oh, what's it called in Rhode Island in Providence, that famous venue. But I did it for the
I don't
Deftones
know.
and Flaming Lips at the Rhode Island venue. And so I was
Nice.
doing all these promo posters at the time. And then the Boulder Weekly, Daily, Weekly, can't remember, Weekly, I think, came and interviewed me and, took pictures of me and was like, "In case you've been seeing the new posters around town, this is the guy that does it." Right.
Yeah,
So at that point, I had a pretty good stack of promo posters that I had made.
sure.
So I decided, so I end up deciding to vend this record show in Denver, and I'm flanked
Right
by
on.
Richard Biffle and Lindsey Kuhn, two
Wait,
poster greats.
and you had mentioned earlier in the interview that Biffle was one of your,
Absolutely.
inspiration and one person you really looked up to.
Absolutely. So I'm sort of
You're
hum-
fanboying a little bit.
I'm trying not to, but I'm
I
trying
know
to
what it's
stay
like.
low
Hey,
key
listen.
humble and just be whatever and just be like, "Nice to meet you." And Richard was looking through my work and expressing that he felt I had talent. And he asked
That's
me,
awesome, man.
it was amazing. And he's like, "What do you want to do?" And Lindsay's over there laughing, and they knew each other.
Sure.
And uh and they're like, "What do you want to do with what are you gonna do with all this?" And I was like, "Well, I want to make rock posters like you guys." And
Yeah.
they were both like, "Wah!" They're like, "You don't want to make rock posters, dude. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Nope, 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 nope."
What
They're
was
like,
their reasoning?
"Because there's just no, you can't live on it. You either have to do it for
Okay.
passion or you can't live on it." Now, Lindsay does print his own. Richard doesn't print his own. I don't print my own, right? So there's a big difference between being just an illustrator and an illustrator and person that crafts your own prints as well.
Right.
And
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 I'm
those
I'm
folks that
familiar
do
with
print their own prints tend to be a little bit more. There's a greater margin for them there to be able to
yeah,
exist
but
on
it
that level.
requires a much larger investment up front to be able to get that
Absolutely, and
equipment because
space.
it's super specialized.
Agreed. And space and
Yes, yes, that
like
is an
when you
excellent
get to the
point.
level of someone like, so it all depends. So like, Emic doesn't pull his own prints. Um,
I mean, Mark Spusta, Jermaine Rogers. I mean, some of my favorite artists that you know that are around on this. I mean, wearing one of Mark's shirts right now. Uh,
Right.
but
But
I
then
mean,
you
they
have
use.
masters like AJ Maste, who does all of his own printing and is just a master of detail,
I
and
want to shout out real quick Jack Firestone, a good friend of
one of
mine
my
who
dear
does.
friends.
Yes, he does
Yeah.
incredible block printing,
Incredible.
and I highly recommend everyone. I'm going to pop up a link to his site. Please check it out. He does
Yeah.
incredible work,
Yeah. And his illustration just gets better and better and better.
better and better every time, every time.
Absolutely.
Jack, love you, buddy.
Love you, Jack. So yeah, so I don't print my own. But Lindsay does, but they were still both just like, you don't want this life, dude.
Mm.
And I was like younger and naive, and I was like, no, no, I'm pretty freaking sure I do. And yeah, so then a little bit of time goes on. I'm still in Boulder. I end up vending some art shows for early further shows in
Mm.
Broomfield and doing some art shows in the poster scene. Now that I did move to Pearl, I also had taken a job working in the poster scene as well as doing the promos for the Fox and Boulder Theater.
What
So I
was the
worked
job
in
working in the scene?
just retail, just
Okay.
in the poster scene is a store. It's
Oh,
owned by
okay.
it's
Right
owned
on,
by a dear
right on.
friend of mine
Okay.
named Bryce Hall. Um, it's just a store, but I
Gotcha.
had ended up working there, and which was it was awesome because it I learned a great deal about artists I'd never heard of or known about before.
Mm.
Uh, the depth of the whole poster world, the market of how it really works.
Sure.
The change in the market because of fish, frankly, because what happens with fish prints and what happened with when fish came back in '09,
Yeah.
it changed poster sales in the print market entirely after that.
I can
Prior to
imagine that.
that, prior to them coming back, there was a great value for some of those old Pollocks because some of them had been severely damaged in terrible rainstorms and
Yep.
nobody, was able to protect them, et cetera. Now, rock posters typically are more valuable when there are less of them or they are very old, where there
So
is only 10 in rotation that are
I
still
just want
in.
to put something out there, and I'm curious to hear your take on it. When I interviewed Justin Hampton in season 1, he had mentioned that at the time, the post-neo explosionism trio of him, Jermaine Rogers, and Emek did the posters for every day of the Queens of the Stone Age tour on 2002 and 2003, and that was really kind of the first time that it was that there was a poster for every single show. Would you say that's roughly accurate? It wasn't common until Fish came back in 2009. I certainly agree with that there. I mean, my very first show was at Alpine Valley 2009, and it was a Pollock print, and they are scarce.
Right. Yeah, I would agree that those three guys are the heralds of the neo post explosion. But prior to that, there was there was a big gap, in my opinion. So,
Mm,
short, let's just take the Grateful Dead out of this equation for a minute.
sure, sure.
When you're talking about the big five and the guys from San Francisco, yeah, those shows all had posters. Everything going on in San Francisco had a poster because that's one of the only ways that they could advertise. Now, the other thing was that they made the text almost impossible to read on purpose because they wanted people that were on board with that vibe that would stand there and go, "What does that say?"
Right, for sure.
Hey. That's who they wanted at their shows. So they purposely did that. Now, if you went to most bands and you said, here's this poster, and the text was, and you couldn't read it,
Right. All wavy.
90% of bands would absolutely deny it.
Sure.
Legibility has become a real thing. Now, it's also a big difference between promo posters, like I was doing for the Boulder and the Fox, and merchandise posters, right?
Right. There,
On a promo
so the
poster,
the fan art
name,
and the
date,
yeah,
where,
right,
5-second read. You should be able to
right.
read. On a merchandise poster, art, text at the bottom. can get away with it if the art's good enough, right?
Yeah, absolutely, I
So
would agree with that.
it's a whole different thing. I still like my posters with a big name on it. What the hell? But the
I can
Grateful
give one.
Dead
Oh,
kept
sorry.
making posters for their shows. Like not every single one though. Not for certainly not for every single one. Imagine how many there'd be, right? Right. But for
Right.
tours, certainly,
True.
for big shows, certainly, for
Tours, absolutely. Tours,
right,
absolutely. I mean, there's gonna, and I believe that great, very greatly predates the single date
right.
concert posters that started.
But here's what happened, in my opinion, with fish prints that I haven't really seen. Now it's more common with, DMB gets it a little bit. Goose is getting it now. Certainly Panic does.
Queens of the Stone Age, I would
Queens,
say,
yeah, a few, yeah.
Tool.
311 is another one that's got a big poster
Yes.
scene
Yeah.
with them. Um, Even though they print more than they ever have before. So if you look at like the numbering on an older print,
Sure.
probably even some of those, when Justin Emick and those guys were doing that for what band was it? Queens then?
Queens.
They probably printed maybe 500 a show. I don't know. I could be wrong, but right. I
I
don't
mean,
know.
that sounds like roughly accurate, I
Randomly,
would
but
say, for the
now
time
like Fish
and
prints
given the
800,
history.
Fish
Right.
prints 800 of one variant, 800 of another. Now there's
Well,
1,600 prints for a single
and it
show.
could be if it's a 3 night run and they have three post, a single poster for each night, it's three times as many.
Right. But what happens now and perhaps this is just the internet that never happened before and certainly wasn't even, uh, what's the word I want to say? It wasn't
Established,
it wasn't a
present,
thing for people to go and get the print and sell it that day for double the money. What I see
flipping,
happening,
the
particularly with
flipping.
fish prints, is someone goes and buys four of them, and then they go, "Well, I'll just hold on to them and I'll sell them tomorrow for twice as much because someone else is too lazy to go stand in line or doesn't want to go try, and now I
I
have it, so
I
I'll
can think of
immediately flip it."
where I have seen the value of concert posters jump, almost instantly is when it comes to Chuck Berry. I love his artwork and I have both of his books. And I see those posters and the day after the concert going for astronomical amounts. And
Well,
and
he's one of those few that are international too.
indeed, indeed. And there's a couple of artists in that sort of pantheon, so to speak.
I'd agree with that.
Um
A very
and
like maybe five, like
Yeah, yeah,
American poster artists that have an international thing going on, and
I would
he's one
agree.
of them. Now, have you seen Chuck Berry prints in person?
It's
There's something away about the way he handles the ink and the glitter. Like I don't know. Look. I've seen a lot of posters in my day. I worked at a poster store. Like I've seen all of them, and there are something about Sperry's that the way he handles his ink is just mind-boggling. Like
And like I said, I have both of his books and I am a fan. The point is that I'm trying to express is just the way that I see those posters being treated in that way that you had mentioned, right after shows. Because I mean, possibly because they're that I mean, they are wonderful posters and they are very desirable. But it seems to me that it's a little bit unfair to the artist because I mean, look, I'm not a fan of NFTs, but one thing that I believe is a good thing about them is the fact that they can have an attachment where anytime it's sold, the artist gets 10% or
continues to
some
pay.
percentage of the
Right.
sale. And, I'd love to get your opinion on, you know, is that like a hot take or is that I think that the artist should be you know.
I've always I come from a very blue collar background,
Mm,
and I always try to make my art as affordable as possible to anybody.
mm.
And I think you've seen
I
that
would,
being in my group.
yes, I would, with
I
the Thursday throwbacks
I cut
and,
ridiculous deals and
absolutely.
probably sell myself very short most of the time.
Yeah,
But
I would agree.
but I also think of it. Here's the thing.
It's accessible.
I don't want to jump back. I don't want to jump back without a tag, but let's go back to Richard Biffle telling me, "Hey, you shouldn't want to make only rock posters," right?
Mm,
Me taking that to heart. But here I am then showing up at poster show after poster show and ending up exhibiting next to Richard. Richard and I get to become very good friends. Okay. He continues to give me wisdom. To this very day, I still speak to the man, but he continues to give me wisdom. He says to me, Mark, you need something other than posters. Ain't nobody living on posters. He's like, it's not a workable gig. Now, it is for Sperry or Emick or a couple people that are in the pantheon of A, very talented, and B,
absolutely.
very well positioned artists who have a lot of connections to a lot of bands. Like, Emick's worked for Metallica, for Christ's sakes. Metallica has never heard of my name.
I mean, as has Justin, you know.
So that puts him in a different level to some degree. And those guys are great. Like I'm happy that they're there. But the fact of the matter is that there just isn't that many. I don't know. For me, at least, there isn't that many gigs to keep me employed as a poster, just doing posters. Right? I would love it.
Sure.
If there was like one a week, I would sit in here in this studio that I'm sitting in
And
now
just bang them
and
out.
just crank them out. Right?
Yeah.
But it's a tough business. You know the famous Hunter S. Thompson quote about everyone I've ever read in the rock and roll industry is a scoundrel, a scumbag, a deviant, and an asshole, and those are just the good ones. So it's a tough industry. And anyways, Richard says you need to do something else, and I said, "Well, what else can I do?" He's like, "What do you paint?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean a little bit." He's like, "Do you paint?" I'm like, "A little bit." And he's like, maybe you should learn to paint. So I went on a journey of learning to paint. Now, this is early when I still lived in Boulder and I'm painting only in acrylics. And I would paint it in acrylics for a number of years in Boulder and started to feel good about it. I was exploratory with them. And then I started to narrow in on making it look really realistic. And then I started to played around with acrylics for a long time. Anyways, finally, Richard's like, dude, why are you painting with kids' paints? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, this is like school paint. He's like, use oil paint if you want people to pay attention, which I still don't do that often because it takes so long. So I start painting with oils. Now, by this time, I left Boulder. I'm in Tennessee and I'm painting with oils. And I'm like, it's going bad. So I call Richard. Hey, Richard, I'm painting with oils. It's a damn mess.
Mm.
He's like, I'll tell you what, buy this set of equipment, have it shipped to my house, fly to Denver. I'll pick you up at the airport. You can stay at my house for a week and I'll teach you to oil paint.
Wow.
So I had a 1 week sabbatical with Richard learning to oil paint. And so any oil painting you ever see me do,
Talk about a master class.
it was. And it was serious business too. We woke up in the morning at 7 a.m. We drank a cup of coffee, had a smoke, and sat down at the easel. And we
Oh,
didn't
I
wake
don't
up
doubt it.
until lunch. And we had a cup of tea, ate some lunch. His wife was super kind. She'd bring us down tea and some food. And we would have another smoke and go back to painting. And then at dinner time, we'd
Wow.
stop and eat dinner. And then we would literally watch Bob Ross, where he would be mortified by Bob Ross's techniques. But so I learned how to paint. That's how I learned how to paint. Anyways.
I mean, that's pretty wild. For those who aren't aware, please follow Mark on Facebook because he does have just incredible art. His website link is in the description of this episode. So please go visit it and peruse his work because it is really there is such a range to it, and it really is like Mark says, it really is affordable, and you can really see that you you also said about how you use every inch of the canvas. You can really see the dedication that's been put into every one of your pieces, in my opinion, and another reason I'm so grateful to have you on the show.
Thanks. For the record, on Instagram at Serlo Studios.
That's where we'll have all of Mark's information is going to be in the description of this video. So don't you worry, listeners and viewers. We'll have it all ready for you here at Secondhand Talent.
But yeah, that's about it, man. And now here I find myself um, still painting, still making posters.
Yep.
I have a big one dropping in May. Part of the whole fun of making rock posters is you're not allowed to talk about it.
Yeah. I do have one other question, just to be because I think we would be remiss to leave this out, is your pin game. And I was I'm curious because you say that you really got into the gig prints in 2009 ish, and cranking out those posters for the Fox. And when did you start or get the idea to produce pins?
It was
Because I
summer.
I I I have a bunch,
It
and
was
I
summer around the same time. It was
yeah.
2010 or 11, I want to say.
Okay.
I was approached by a person who said, "Hey, pins are really taking off.
Yeah.
You can draw. Like, I know somewhere we can get these pins made. I want to do this." And so I made one and it did okay. And then this person, I don't know if you're familiar with Jen Bernstein. She used to be an editor for High
Tangentially.
Times magazine.
Tangentially, I'm familiar. I like have the
Okay.
name.
I
Yeah.
mean, she's a fish kid. She goes to shows and stuff. So I'd also done Fish Tour. So I did Fish Tour. Well, I did the West Coast run of '09 when they returned.
Hmm.
Um,
I've never
Red
been to a show
Rocks,
on the West Coast of all
Red
all
Rocks,
my
and
shows.
Shoreline and the Gorge and all that.
Yep.
And then 2010, I saw the Broomfield shows. 2011, I think I skipped some of that, and then 12 and 13, I did the entire tour. 14,
Oh,
I did another 7 shows. So I kind of did my time back on Fish Tour a little bit. Um, but at the time, that was pins were raging with Fish, right?
yeah. Oh, I
So,
made some of my own. I absolutely.
but we also got a gig where I did the official pins for the first legal cannabis High Times Cannabis Cup in the United States in 2012 in Denver. And
That's
so I was
awesome.
working for High Times, which living in Colorado was flipping awesome because I could write off dispensary purchases as R&D.
Oh man. Not
My
only do you get a
favorite part,
break,
my
you get a
favorite part of
break.
the whole thing.
It's a bigger break than a Kit Kat bar, man.
That's my favorite part of the whole thing. But
Oh,
yeah, we were working for High Times, and I was doing all the pins for the cannabis cups, and we ended up doing them for the Sonoma Cup, the San Francisco Cup, the Seattle Cup, and we'd go to the cups and sell the pins, and yeah, and then
and
I
I mean,
just
just
started making dead pins and fish pins and whatever freaking pins I wanted to make, and for a while there, all I had to do was say, "Hey, this is for sale," and I'd sell out in like 3 seconds, literally. 500 pins, 30
I
seconds.
remember. I
And
remember.
and I knew then too, as much as I enjoyed that, I knew then too that was a market that was destined to crash. I was like, this just can't continue.
It's not
There's
sustainable. There's going to be too many producers. There's going to be a
correct,
overly saturated market.
correct. And that's exactly what happened. And I warned of
Yes.
it, and people didn't like me warning of it because they felt that, well, you're successful at this. You're just being a dick. Like, and it's like,
Mm.
no, I'm not really being a dick. Your idea is pretty crappy. And so there was all these crappy ideas, right? And then someone would make a crappy idea into a pin, try to sell it, not sell it because it was a crappy idea to begin with. And I'm not pointing fingers at anyone in particular.
No,
And then they'd get real bitter and sour on the whole pinning thing, right? So it started to like infect the whole pinning trading community because, well, I made a
sure.
pin, one bought mine, and it was that sort of attitude.
Yeah, it becomes
But I kind
almost
of saw it.
adversarial.
And I kind of saw it coming, and I decided to pull out early and just be like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna," because
Yeah, just like, listen, trust your gut. If you've got that feeling and you've been making art for, as long as you have been, I, I trust that feeling, kind of how we were talking earlier about, me having kind of like a keyword list of jokes and a comedy set that I do, not as a set list, but kind of as like a reference sheet that I can use when I am trying, when I read the room. I know which jokes I can pull from the pick list that are right for that moment.
yeah, I mean, I was reading the room, and it just
Exactly. That's
I was
that's
getting the
exactly
light,
the
bro. That's all there was to it. I was getting the light, and I was like, "This is time for me to quit this." And but also at the same time, I was painting a lot more, and I was really trying to make perhaps one of the more ill-advised decisions of my career, but to pivot from selling people 15, 18, $20 pins.
Right.
But I was trying to get people to pivot from buying a $15 pin to, hey, look at this 150, 200, $300 painting. Probably not
And
the right.
what size paintings were you working with back then? I mean, these are I think 11 by 8, isn't that?
No, it's 11 by 14.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I'm not good at measuring.
I mean, it all depends. I used to do, I mean, I have done some very large format paintings in oil that did sell for appropriate amounts of money, in the multi thousands. Um, but it's tough for me to work that large. Like right here is a giant
Oh,
canvas,
wow.
right? But
And what size canvas is that? Just so if
that's
our lit
three
for our
by
audio listeners.
three
What was it?
by it's 3 foot by 5 foot, maybe.
Wow.
Um, 3 foot by 4 foot, something. Um, but like as much as I prefer to work large and in charge, selling, shipping, and handling a painting of that size is a whole nother animal, you know.
Oh, yes. I'm well aware of what those costs
And so I quickly realized that I had to work on smaller format in order to be able to handle the shipping and safely ship them from home as well as produce them affordably and quickly enough that for what the money they're pulling, like I couldn't put a 3 foot by 4.5 foot painting up and start an auction at $50 and sell it at 70,
Right. And I think it's really cool what you do with regards to because that's how I got this painting. What Mark does is in his Facebook group, um, that he will have a painting of the day and he'll auction it, and they start at whatever bid, and bidding is in increments that are set by Mark, and they really are affordable. And if you would like a specific painting like the one I have of Jason that I got for my wife, contact Mark. Reach out on Facebook, reach out on Instagram. Is very very receptive to those requests.
Yeah, I mean, I do the auctions, like you said, for paintings that take me 4 hours, 5 hours,
Absolutely.
paintings that take me 3 months. I can't do that for, you know.
Well, and what I think is also great about it is, the Mickey painting, not quite public domain, is I mean, it's mixed media, like we were talking about earlier with the comic books that you had lying around. And I love seeing, new stuff, even, new styles that I haven't seen before in your work. As so continuing to kind of try different things and, you know,
I mean, I'm
continue
looking at
always continue to build.
right now off camera, I'm looking at a stack of canvases I'll show you this one. It's an oil painting that I just never finished.
What?
Over there in the cabinet, you know, kind of works both
Just in the
ways.
cabinet. That's so cool.
So it's just an old oil painting that I've never finished, and that I hope someday I do, but I don't have the heart to throw it away. So, yeah, it's, you know, art's a
I mean,
journey.
that's
It's just a part of me. It's nothing that I can turn on or off. Um, and I mean that in both ways. I can't shut it off. I'm always going to doodle or make art of some degree. But I also can't turn it on when I'm having a bad week and I just feel like my juice isn't there, you know, and like it's like to some degree I can with some portions of it, illustration, of course, and you know, hey, I need a logo or work out this for me. Sometimes if there's a specific goal and need, then yes. But as far as outwardly just creating some completely new out of nowhere, like I just showed you, kind of
right.
painting, um, I can't turn that on as much as I can't turn it off. There might be 3 weeks where I'm in here like,
I mean, it's very much like stand up. I mean, that's why, I don't necessarily take a lot of gigs very far in advance these days, is because, it's really contingent on, how I'm,
spontaneity.
yeah, you get like, it's one of those things that, you know, I, it's partly if it's a mood, and it's partly I don't want to disappoint the audience. I want them to have the best experience I can provide. And, it's incredible to me how consistent you are in that regard.
Well, shucks,
So,
thanks, man.
well,
So
looking forward to seeing that project that you can't talk about coming up. And
yeah, I mean, it's coming up in May. I don't know. We'll see.
well, at the time of this recording, so it may or may not have been released, but we will certainly let you know when we find out more information about it here on Secondhand Talent. Follow us on social media, follow us here on YouTube or wherever you're listening. We're available in audio on all podcast platforms. Thank you again to Tenacious Toys for providing the eye candy over here. And thank you, of course, to Mark Serlo, artist. Again, find all of his links in the description of this episode. Mark, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, man. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we had one hell of a conversation,
Honestly,
including and more what these folks may see.
I mean, I was just about to say there's so much incredible conversation that for for time's sake we just had to leave out of the episode, unfortunately. We could do a two-parter, but this season is so jam-packed with wonderful episodes that we want to get out to you right away. If you want to see the uncut version, we're going to at some point uh have a place where you can get those access that information that you
Send it
haven't
to the
seen.
Patreon.
We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there one day, but in the meantime, please like and subscribe. And if you want to find out a place to listen to the audio, check out www.secondhandtalent.com. And we do have some limited edition merch available. That was a collaboration with Bayleaf Studios and Mife Designs. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Mark. This has been another
Thank
episode
you,
of
man.
Secondhand Talent, and we will see you next Wednesday.
Get on it.
And that's a podcast. There we go. Later.
Cool.